Hey everyone, it's the F1ng podcast. I'm your co-host here, Nick Harrington.
I'm Bowen Belmer.
If you can please do us a huge favor, please like and subscribe to us wherever it is you're listening to us. You can find us on all podcast platforms. Also, go ahead and find us on Instagram and give us a follow. You can find us at the F1ng podcast. Please enjoy. Welcome to the first episode. I'm Nick Harrington.
I'm Bo Belmer.
This is our first ever episode here.
Yes.
Bo, we're here in the studio.
It is also our first podcast we've ever recorded together.
Yeah.
And we've only known each other for, I don't know, a couple months maybe?
Yeah. 2 months, I'd say.
So we're going to limp through this together with everybody, and it's going to get way better as time goes on.
Yeah. No, we got this. We got Jake here in the studio, too. He's on the mixer right there. Might be chiming in, hearing his voice and whatnot. But the first episode here, we've got a quick intro of who Bo and I are, why we're making this podcast, what it's going to be about, why you should tune in. We're going to do a quick season recap. If you're new to F1, if you're just listening to this for the first time, what the fuck's even happened this season in F1? Newsflash, maybe not a lot. Austria recap, and then a Silverstone preview, and we'll get you guys on your way. Sound good?
Yeah. Oh, you were asking me? That wasn't rhetorical? Oh. Yeah, dude, that sounds awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So this is the first episode. I think it's important for us to kind of say why we're making this podcast, what this is all going to be about, kind of our history of just real quickly who we are, what got us into F1 and whatnot. You want to kind of kick it off here for us?
Yeah, sure. How detailed do we want to go in the backstory? Okay.
I'll leave it up to you.
That was great. Yes, my name's Bo Belmer. I am from the great state of Wisconsin. I have lived around the country in New York, in Maryland, in Texas, and now back in Wisconsin. Work background is in finance predominantly, now into real estate and real estate financing. I do have my own podcast called Opportunity Cost, so I have a little bit
Shameless
of experience.
plug right there.
A little bit of experience podcasting.
Shameless plug right off the top.
That we're going to plug immediately in the show.
You're paying for that sponsorship, right?
Yeah, no free ads. So Nick and I decided to partner up to do an F1 podcast. I became a fan of F1 just back in 2017 or 18 it would have been. I was working in New York at the time with a lot of guys from the UK and a couple in Asia as well, and it was popular among some of those crowds, and so I would hear people talking about it. I knew nothing really about motorsport. I mean, I grew up liking cars in I was born in 1995 and watched the Fast and Furious movie since, but didn't know anything about motorsport, and so I started hanging out with and working with some of these people that were really into it, that got me into it. Then at that point, I was kind of watching races occasionally, but not following every driver, every team until Drive to Survive came out. It was kind of the catalyst for most Americans, at which point I really discovered what Formula One really was. And when I describe it to people now, I mean, I think that the actual race itself, like the Sunday Grand Prix, is 30% of the interest for me. You know, the rest of it is everything that happens outside of the race and in between. I was going to say in between the lines, but in between lights out and checkered flag, right? And so it's essentially, modern day Game of Thrones as a sport with like fighter jet pilots on the ground. Like it's really crazy.
Yeah, there's nothing like F1, I would say. The race is always interesting. Like that's why F1 exists, is for that race every Sunday. But it's all the drama that happens in between the races with the drivers, the shakeups, the sponsors, the teams, the fans, what's happening in the paddock. And so it's a lot more to that than just the actual race.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think you could be a casual fan and not watch the actual race and follow the drama and then just look at the result, which is probably what Jake's going to do, and enjoy it just as much. Maybe not just as much, but you know what I mean? Like it really is like a sport within a sport in a grand sense.
Yeah, and I think also F1's interesting. I've got buddies that are like massive NFL fans, NBA fans. They know the backup players for the Bears' third string defensive team. And that's like 60 people per team that they memorize. Right. They know every position, where these guys went to college. I like sports. I'm a sports guy, but F1 is simple to me, where you got 20 drivers. So it's very easy just to remember the names. I mean, I've got like a pretty small brain, I would say. And so keeping track of everything can be kind of hard. And so I like how simple F1 can be, from just following the drivers and knowing who's involved in the sport.
Exactly. 20 drivers, 10 teams. It's also, because of like the international nature of the sport too, you get to learn a lot more about each driver, and they're very, well, I was going to say they're very different backstories. spoiler alert, a lot of them come from very wealthy families. But if you ignore that part, like their actual background, where they grew up, and their like culture and those types of things kind of bleed into the sport, which you don't get as much, especially in American sports, right? So that part is pretty interesting as well.
Yeah. I'd say I kind of fall into the majority of fans in the U.S. now with F1, where I kind of knew about F1 growing up. My nanny actually, back when I was like a little child, like a little Nino kid running around, they were from India and from the UK. And so they would always wake up at like 3 a.m. in the morning to watch these races. And I was like 10 years old, and I thought they were just crazy. I'm like, what are they doing at 3 a.m.? 10, 15, 20 years later, Drive to Survive comes out. That's really what got me hooked in the sport. Like, I've always loved racing. I always played like racing games growing up, like Gran Turismo on the PlayStation, Need for Speed, watching Fast and Furious. This came out, and I was like, where has this been my whole life? Like, This is exactly what I needed. And now I feel like F1 is so easy for the casual fan to follow, because before Instagram, it was very difficult, I would say, to get into the sport unless you were actively watching and reading about F1 and watching the races on Sunday. Now we're so much closer attached to the drivers, to what's going on, to the news, that it almost feels like you know the drivers to a sense.
Yeah. Between Instagram and Twitter, you can keep up with it so actively.
Yeah.
Can you also just like plug your business really quick, so I'm not the only
that
plugged their other hustles?
Yeah. So Nick Harrington, I am from Des Moines, Iowa originally. Live here now in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm in real estate, so investing, helping clients to buy and sell real estate as well. I'm a real estate agent. That's how Bo and I actually met, was through the business. So let's talk about why we made this podcast, because I think when I first watched Drive to Survive, I got hooked, and I was waking up at 6 a.m., 5 a.m., whatever time to watch these races. I go to Spotify to find an F1 podcast. I couldn't find anything that I liked listening to.
Sure.
Everything was either super in the weeds and not really for the casual fan, or it was, I don't know, there's a couple other groups out there that make podcasts, but it just wasn't for me. It wasn't like really connecting with me. And so we made this for the casual American fan, I would say. Like someone that knows what F1 is, knows that the cars go fast and go around a track, maybe knows some of the drivers. But that's kind of like what this is for. It's for the casual F1 fan that maybe just got into the sport or has been watching it for like 5 to 10 years even. Yeah,
and I would think of it as, if you look at motorsports in the U.S., you have the fast and left boys, the NASCAR boys. We want the fast and left and right boys.
Both left and right boys.
Yeah, both left and right boys. No, but really, I think that was a good summation of kind of why we decided to do this. A lot of the content I see as well is either so in the weeds that even as a fan for multiple years, I don't understand it, because I was not a driver myself growing up. I didn't kart, and I don't have like the engineering mechanical background to really like break down all those nitty-gritty details. The other side of the coin was, it was so casual that it just was for a niche audience that wasn't us. So trying to fill that gap, I think, is really where we fall.
Yeah, cool. Well, Bo, I kind of want to throw you onto the hot seat here.
Yeah,
if you're okay with that. I got some questions. I don't have them wrote down, but I got some good ones for you.
I was looking to see if you did. He confirmed does not have them written down.
Yeah, no prep here. So real quick, favorite driver?
Yuki Tsunoda.
All right, why?
Dude's hilarious. So
the dude is literally a cartoon character.
Yes, he is a caricature of what I would want an F1 driver to be. I think there's a couple legitimate reasons. So his rise through the ranks into becoming an F1 driver was extremely impressive. I should have looked, and I really should know this, the actual time from first amateur to first F1. I would wager it was one of the fastest rises anybody's ever had. Mm-hmm. I do enjoy the fact that he is, as of right now, he's the only driver from the country of Japan.
Yep.
I like Japan. I like JDM cars a lot, Japanese kind of car culture in general. He also, when he started appearing on Drive to Survive, there were so many hilarious segments with him. And mind you, I believe his first year in F1, he was only 19 years old. And the way that he interacts with their team on the radio is very
hilarious,
funny.
Man.
It's very, I don't know if vulgar is the right word, but just like the way he expresses himself is funny. And what's even funnier is the explanation coming from Drive to Survive was, well, you have to understand, Yuki learned English growing up around engineers and mechanics in the garage. That's how they spoke. So that's how he speaks. And it's just such a funny,
that's the excuse.
That's the excuse.
It's okay if he does it. It's how he was raised.
Which is good. I really appreciate somewhat of an underdog too. Yeah. I don't know that I would really call him an underdog, other than the fact that he did come up so quickly, and he drives for AlphaTauri, which is also my favorite team. Which I believe was that going to be one of the next questions.
Yeah, but okay. He's stealing my thunder here, but that's all right.
My apologies. So he drives for AlphaTauri, which is my favorite team, and I enjoy the fact that it's like a sister junior team to Red Bull being the best team. And when you get these moments where somebody who's like literally at a disadvantage from the start can come up with a good result, I think that's so exciting. I mean, Gasly had a win in 2021.
Yep.
I believe it was in Spa.
I think it was Italy.
Yeah. And again, should know that. But that was so exciting, watching somebody in a car that is like objectively worse win a race.
Dude, that's one thing that when I talk to fans or people that are into sports betting about F1, and they don't understand that if you're not a top 4 car, the odds of you winning a race are astronomical.
Right.
And they're like, hey, who should I bet on for the weekend? And they start to look at the lines. They're like, dude, these lines are trash. And I'm like, well, it's because that's big of a deal when an underdog, like a driver in an AlphaTauri or any car other than right now, basically a Red Bull, wins a race.
Right.
Because it's just not what happens in the sport.
Well, and some of the excitement is just like, can they even get in the points? I mean, every week right now when I'm watching Yuki and Nick DeVries, R.I.P. Yeah, soon to be. I'm literally rooting for them to take 10th place or better. Which for Americans is so hard because we have the if you ain't first, you're last mentality. Yeah. But when you really like dive into the sport and you realize, hey, this can be really exciting, rooting for somebody to take 10th.
Yeah, but it's also like there's 3 or 4 different races happening at the same time.
Right.
Which I think is what makes F1 exciting too. You've got like 3 different, maybe 4 different packs of cars this year. And I mean, it's almost been decided who's going to win the race every single race this season, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, you've got like all these different battles that are happening. For second, for fourth, best of the worst. So it keeps it interesting to me, you know?
What else you got? Any more hot seat?
Okay, so who would you say is the most overrated driver on the grid right now?
Sorry, we're going to cut that out. The most overrated on the grid right now. Oh, man. Okay, as they sit today, probably Lewis Hamilton. And it's not... Well, I don't know. Man, that's a tough question, actually. So the first 2 that came to mind were Lewis, because everyone assumes he's the man because he's Lewis. The other that came to mind right away was actually Leclerc, because there was a lot of assumption. Like I think going into this season, a lot of people assumed it was going to be Max or Char, and it was going to be, in my opinion, it was going to be like a shootout between the 2 of them.
Yep.
And whether it be him specifically or Ferrari, it's not working out.
No.
And so I can't tell yet, is it a Charles Leclerc issue or is it a Ferrari issue? But with the way that Sainz has been driving, it's looking more and more like a Charles Leclerc issue than a Ferrari issue, right? So like, I don't know if that's a great answer or not, and I hate that answer because I actually like him. But people, I think, rate him. Like, I saw the F1 video game when it came out. I'm pretty sure he was like the 2nd or 3rd highest rated driver.
Yep.
I don't know if that's deserved by performance.
I don't know if that is either. I would say like it's kind of an interesting grid this year, I would say, where you've got some vets that have been around forever.
Sure.
You've got a couple guys that have maybe been in F1 for like 5 years or so, but then you've got a bunch of rookies that are all like or like 1 or 2 years. And so it's hard to say if a rookie is overrated or not right now.
Right.
When like, and that removes like half the grid, I would say almost right now. Yeah, I'd say like Leclerc probably isn't performing, but also the Ferrari, I feel like in general, it's just kind of been like a dumpster fire.
That's the question. Is it a Ferrari issue or is it a Charles Leclerc issue? And it seemed for a while like, well, it must be a Ferrari issue, but as time goes on, it's becoming less clear that that is the case. And I hate to say it because I really like Charles Leclerc. I want to see him.
I think he's a great guy.
Yeah, he seems like a good dude. Char, if you want to come on the show.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, you're welcome. Episode 2. But no, I honestly think it could potentially be him. And I hate to say it.
Yeah.
Do you have an opinion? Who do you think is
the most overrated right now? It's hard to say. I kind of feel like George Russell might be that guy.
Okay.
I never have been a Russell fan. I would say he's like a very consistent performer race after race. I think he was kind of a bit overhyped. He did okay at Williams, got that Mercedes seat. He performed well last year, beat Lewis. I don't know. I just think I've never seen that like thing that everyone else sees in George Russell. So I would say like overall, I would have to give it to George, and maybe that's just because I have a personal vendetta against him.
Yeah, no, I get it. He's boring and whiny, and I think that's why people don't like him.
Yep.
He's kind of like he's almost like the Peyton Manning. And that's giving him a lot of credit because Peyton Manning's obviously one of the all-time greats in the NFL. But he's similar to like a Peyton Manning figure where he's not exciting per se, but he's consistent.
Yeah.
He's also pretty whiny, which is I think why a lot of people can't stand him.
Well, that's kind of Mercedes MO in general is being a little whiny.
Well, yeah, Lewis isn't exactly known for not being whiny,
No.
or Toto for that matter.
Yep.
So yeah, you're right. Yeah, I like that. I like that take. I think that's a solid. It's still a little bit of a question mark for him for me as well, though, because he is young too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is only I think it's his 4th season with F1.
Around there, yeah.
This is the stats we're going to need to know
To
going forward, guys.
sharpen
This
up
is a
on.
learning lesson for everybody.
Okay, last question I got for you.
Yeah,
So you're married,
I am married.
right? That wasn't my question, but
Okay.
that was
Yes.
So you're married, Bo. Your wife is out at the bar at a restaurant, and who is the last F1 driver you would want her to run into?
Fernando Alonso.
You had that ready.
Yeah, dude. Fernando Alonso is Mr. Steal Your Girl, always and forever.
Yeah, I agree.
He is like
He's also the oldest driver on the grid.
Yeah, but dude's like
Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
He was dating Taylor Swift allegedly for a while.
I wouldn't
don't know
doubt
if you
it.
heard about that.
He's the Brad Pitt, the Tom Cruise. He is not the dude you want in the same bar
Yeah.
as your wife, girlfriend,
I think
daughter, whatever.
The one I would want in
Mom.
there would be Yuki. I think I'd be like, okay, with hey babe, like meet
Just like
Yuki.
being a really good guy. Yeah, I would say Yuki. Lando.
I don't know. Lando, I feel like
You think so?
yeah. I wouldn't want. Lando's got like the whole nice boy thing to him, cute, innocent.
Yeah, but he's like low key, like a monster, maybe.
Yeah, a shark or something.
Okay.
You said Fernando
Alonso. Yeah. You look at this guy.
This is Mr. Steal Your Girl.
Oh, easily.
Oh yeah. Hang on. Let me
Easily.
look at. Are you?
I
Just,
got Landon.
But
That's my take. I got Landon. Landon would be the
Who's
the,
Lando?
Landon? Who? Oh,
Moore.
Lando Norris.
Lando Norris.
Oh, this
Yeah,
is
yeah,
so
yeah.
great. Our
Our
guys,
producer.
if you couldn't tell, our producer knows 0 things about F1. But what's going to be great about this is as you learn,
so does
so
Jake.
does Jake.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it's real
we're gonna do some weekly hot seat questions
Yeah.
for Jake.
Weekly trivia, man.
Yeah, to learn
Wow.
about F1.
That's gonna be tough.
No, you got this. Don't worry.
Okay, so
I want to look up really quick what pictures of Fernando, Jake. Will you just Google imaging Fernando?
Yeah. This right here.
lift it up a
You're
little bit
telling me
higher.
you feel comfortable with this guy in the
Yeah.
same bar as your girl?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
That guy-
Yeah, he doesn't photograph that well. Let me tell you though.
I mean, yeah.
You
Being
see
around
this,
an
you see
F1
this guy in a
driver.
race car, though.
Huh?
You see him in a race car.
Yeah.
Different story.
That's a different.
Yeah.
story.
When he has a
Yeah.
tracksuit on, good luck.
If he's just hanging around.
Yeah, are you serious right now?
Yeah.
Jake doesn't see
Jake
it.
doesn't know.
Fernando,
No.
come on the show. I need you.
Okay, so
Who is your favorite driver?
dude, so I used to be a big Max Verstappen fan.
Boo.
Back when, yeah, I know. When Drive to Survive first came out, when Hamilton and Mercedes was that team,
Mm-hmm.
I was just so ready for any other driver
Someone
to come
else
in
to
and
be that
dethrone
guy.
them, you
Yeah.
know? And so I'm not a Hamilton fan. I became a Max fan because he was the only guy that could really take on Hamilton, take on that Mercedes
Mm.
team. And then when they won, was that 2 years ago, and they finally like beat Mercedes, was one of the best seasons of F1 that's probably ever existed, and all the controversy that people still talk about today with it. So Max used to be, but I don't know, man. I feel like now we're in this stage of F1 where we're back to those days of Hamilton and Bottas winning every single race with Mercedes, and that's what Red Bull is now with Max and with Checo.
Yeah.
And so it's
Well,
hard to cheer for Max right now.
You go into any race and you know that Max is going to win, and you
Exactly.
expect Checo to take second. The surprise is really whether Checo takes second or not.
Yes.
Is really the question at this point. And for those listening, I mean, in this past week, I believe Max won by 23 seconds.
Yeah,
26
23 seconds, but then he came into pit. So I think he only ended up winning by 5 seconds when it was all said and done, but he had
Right.
a 26-second lead.
We'll
came in
get,
for
we'll
the
get into
fastest
that.
lap.
We'll get into that part. We'll get into that later.
Yeah. But to answer your question, I think Charles Leclerc is
Okay.
who I would say is my my favorite driver now, because
Okay.
I think he's a great guy, great driver, just a very good dude overall, I would say. Yeah, so probably Leclerc.
I just called him maybe the most overrated guy on the grid. So this is,
Yeah, that
this is
hurts.
off
We're
to a
off to
great
a-
start. Yeah, it's off to a really great start. Does that follow suit to your favorite team then? Is it Ferrari?
No, I don't like Ferrari. I don't like Mercedes. I cheer for Red Bull still. I do like them. I want to see them continue to succeed. It's still getting harder and harder to be a Red Bull and a Max fan, though. But I think I like Aston Martin a lot. I think what they're doing this year is super cool and exciting, and Alonso coming out of nowhere and really finishing consistently on the podiums. I love them. I also love the car that they have. The green is just one of the best colors, I think, that you could ever make for a car.
That is one of the worst problems with being an AlphaTauri fan right now. Is their car looks exactly like three other teams' cars. It looks so close to Haas. It looks so close to
Alfa Romeo.
Alfa Romeo. If you can't see the red from the front, and it is very distracting.
It's impossible,
sometimes.
man.
Yeah.
Like those midfield late pack of the battle, you can't tell who's who.
I end up looking up, like on the F1 site, you can get the mini map with the dots.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
that's usually how I'll be able to tell. Like, I'm gonna tell, okay, he's on
Who's
turn
who?
13 or whatever, so I can see him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, I think McLaren would be a close second for me too. Because Daniel Ricciardo, I think that was everyone's first love in F1. You know, that was the guy that like stole everyone's hearts when the show came out.
He is the most American, non-American person that you're ever going to come across.
Yep.
And we can only hope that he lands a seat very soon. Goodbye, Nick DeVries. I really hope we see Daniel Ricciardo in that seat soon.
Same.
Awesome. All right. Season recap.
Season recap. Moving in here. Bo, what's happened this season? What's going on?
Yeah, so we touched on this a little bit in our, what we've already been speaking about, but essentially Red Bull wins everything. It is literally free money to bet on Max Verstappen every single week. I don't know why more people aren't doing this, including myself. Red Bull is extremely dominant. The car is extremely fast. Max is extremely talented. They're literally winning everything. I think at this point they're very close to probably clinching the constructors.
They have to be,
I would
man.
think.
They have to be.
So just looking at the standings, and for people who are new to the sport, the constructors championship is essentially the team championship. How many points the team accumulates between their two drivers as opposed to the other teams. And then you have the drivers championship, which is, as it sounds, who are the best drivers and how do they rank. Those are two separate awards. In this case, they are one award because Max Verstappen is crushing both of them.
Yeah, Max actually has enough points right now to be leading alone the Constructors Championship.
Right, just himself, yes. And so the current constructor standings are Red Bull with 377 points, Mercedes in second place with 178 points, extremely widespread.
Yeah.
Aston Martin in third with 175 points, Ferrari in fourth with 154, Alpine with 47, McLaren 29, Haas 11, Alfa Romeo 9, Williams 7, AlphaTauri 2.
R.I.P.
With both of those points being scored by my boy Yuki Tsunoda.
Yep. He is having a good season, I would say.
Yeah.
For 2 points, like Yuki's been performing, I would say, as one of the best drivers this season.
So I heard an interesting potential Yuki conspiracy for the rest of the year.
Go.
Yeah, so I heard this online. I heard that one scenario that could play out for the rest of this year, which we would all love to see, is Max clinches the Drivers' Championship, Red Bull clinches the Constructors' Championship. They swap Max and Yuki, AlphaTauri to Red Bull, for 2 reasons. One, and for those listening who don't know as well, Red Bull and AlphaTauri are essentially sister teams. They're under similar ownership, let's call it. If they swap those seats, it will tell us how good is the Red Bull car, how good is Yuki, and how good is Max Verstappen.
Yeah, Max goes on to still win races.
Essentially, that swap would be taking one of the lowest scoring drivers and putting them in the best car, and taking the highest scoring driver and putting him in arguably the worst car, and saying, hey, what happens? I would love to see that play out. I would love to see them drop DeVries, add Ricciardo, swap Yuki and Max for the last couple races, and then basically see what happens. And there's been talk of Checo losing that second Red Bull seat potentially. I don't know how real that is. To me, that actually sounds less realistic than swapping the two, but we'll see.
Yeah, I would say this story of the season, it's been Red Bull has just absolutely ran away with the season. They're unstoppable. They've won every single race. I think Max has won all races but 2. The other 2 with Checo winning those. I I think the biggest story, the biggest headline has been Aston Martin this year.
Yeah.
They came out with a surprise podium in the first race where Alonso finished second. And I think he's had 5 podiums so far this season. So they've been performing way above what anyone expected. Historically, they're like 4th, 5th, 6th place.
I mean, they're making Stroll competitive.
Like that's hard, man.
That's hard.
That's
yeah.
hard.
Stroll was one of those guys who was. It was always a question mark. Like, is this guy in F1 because he's an F1 caliber driver, or is he in F1 because his dad literally owns the
company?
Team? And honestly, in his defense, prior to this year, I was definitely in the camp of like, it's real hard to feel legit when your dad owns the team. You know, that'd be like, I'm trying to think of another sports reference. I don't even have one.
No,
because
it's just like so uncommon.
It's just so uncommon, yeah. But that being said, he has performed this year as well.
Yeah.
And it kind of leads to like the surprise that is the Aston Martin team as a whole, which has been interesting.
Because they had Vettel on that team before.
Right.
Got rid of him, picked up Alonso, which to me, that was a very surprising move for them because they basically got rid of one veteran to pick up another veteran. When it's like, I think Vettel was also very ready to leave the sport and he just seemed like weathered and tired and like just like an old rag that was like thrown around forever, you know? So I think he was kind of over it. But I don't know. I don't think Stroll wouldn't be in F1 if his dad didn't own the team, is my personal opinion. I think he's good enough. He also has like a shattered hand that he's been driving with all season, which is impressive.
Yeah, he broke, I believe it was both wrists or both hands in a biking accident prior to the season starting, and he hasn't missed anything. So that alone
is insane.
Is pretty wild. And I think that, you know, and this is maybe just one of the things that American people probably don't realize just about these F1 cars is just how difficult they are to drive. Not even like, I'm not even talking competing. I just mean drive.
To get in.
Like, the amount of wear and tear on the person's body when they're going through this amount of G-force and the amount of strength they're actually using to turn, the neck strength that they're using, it's insane. So, yeah, hats off to him for that. I do still think you're right, though, and he probably wouldn't be in the sport if his dad didn't.
Yeah, it helps, though. You know, if I had a rich dad and he's like, hey, do you want to be an F1? I would say yeah.
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
I would say too that we've got a new worst team on the grid this year. So this is the first time we're seeing, unfortunately, Williams step out of that 10th place. AlphaTauri is kind of that new team now. That's
Well, what's funny about that? So I agree. Unfortunately, it is the truth. What's funny about that though is if you went driver for driver, same car, I don't think that holds true. Sargent's awful so far. You know, so far he's the only American guy on the grid.
Yeah,
and so Logan, if you somehow hear this, I don't actually think you're awful.
No, dude, he has not performed, and then De Vries has not performed either.
Right, but then the big difference is like Yuki and Ocon,
or Albon.
Albon are both outperforming their car.
Absolutely,
but I think the Williams car is a little better.
Than the AlphaTauri car?
Yes.
I agree.
Like, I think if you were to swap Yuki and Albon seats, Yuki would also be outperforming Albon.
Agreed.
In the same car, right?
Agreed.
So, like, it's interesting. I guess that leads to what you were saying, though. Williams as a team took a large step forward.
Yeah.
More so, I'm just sad for AlphaTauri.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think of any mental gymnastics to defend AlphaTauri, and there really is no mental gymnastics. The good news is there will be no AlphaTauri next year. And they're going to be rebranding for 2024.
To Toro Rosso?
It hasn't been confirmed yet. So
I thought it was weird they moved away from that in the first place.
Yeah, agreed. So it has been confirmed that they will be rebranding with new lead sponsorship for 2024. It has not been confirmed yet what that branding will actually be. The only comments that were made on it were that it will be as close to Red Bull as regulations allow.
Red Bull sugar-free.
Yeah, right. Diet Red Bull.
Yeah.
And Yuki had a quote saying Toro Rosso would be cool. Basically saying, hey, it would be cool if we did that.
Yeah.
So
I would like them to go back to that.
So maybe that's the juju we need.
New name.
New branding, new car. Just new everything. Fire everybody, honestly. Redo the whole thing.
Yeah, clean house. Keep Yuki, though.
Keep Yuki, please.
On the Yuki topic, kind of off of this, but on the Yuki topic, you saw the new season of Drive to Survive.
I did.
They made him look so bad in that newest season.
Dude, they
made him look so bad.
Yeah, well, what's funny is he hasn't really looked good in any
No,
of the seasons
true.
of Drive to Survive. But then they do so much media around him outside of that. Like they recently did you watch the mini boat races with him and Danny Ricciardo, and then the monster truck thing with Max Verstappen? He looks great in those. And I mean, not just he looks great as a driver, but also just like as a personality, as a person. And every other piece of media I've seen that interacts with him makes him look like this really nice, like young man. And then they throw him in Drive to Survive, and he looks like the biggest
devil.
dick.
Yeah.
Like just a bad dude.
And I feel like they probably had so much content for him to go off of, but they're like, oh, we need a storyline for Yuki. Let's just make him look like the worst. I think to me, what did it was all the highlights of him with his trainer. He's bitching about working out the entire time.
He's literally like, I don't want to be an athlete.
Yes.
I mean, they paint narratives, as we know.
For sure.
The show, it is good. It gets people into the sport. I really enjoy it.
It's more of a soap opera than it is like an actual documentary.
They've already been caught like cutting scenes out of order to like make a story. like they'll take a clip from a race and a clip in the paddock and make it look like it was
this actually happened,
yes,
like,
and it didn't.
sequentially.
Which is also, by the way, why Max did not appear in seasons 2 and 3.
Yeah,
because they painted him as kind of like the villain to Hamilton in season 1, and allegedly on record he said that he will not participate in the seasons because he didn't like how they branded him. So, like, Yuki, stand up for yourself, man. I got you.
Yuki, back out.
Yeah, back out. Tell him it's over.
I would say, like, another big surprise I have, McLaren's really struggled this season. I thought they'd be competing a lot higher up. They're currently in 5th place, and I think a lot of that's because Lando just had a phenomenal race at Austria this last weekend. But they're kind of stuck in no man's land. Like they're looking at a 5th place finish, best overall. Mercedes is starting to become more competitive, I would say. They're kind of figuring things out with the car, but yeah, I mean, no one's going to touch Red Bull this season. We might as well just like chalk the season up. And
yeah, we're really like you're competing for the middle of the pack, but really though, that is some of the more interesting battle. And so to people who are kind of casual fans, I would urge you to really pay attention to that because that's where more of the interesting storylines happen. I mean, even speaking of McLaren, Piastri surprised me a little bit. He started the season extremely slow, and he was kind of on the Nick DeVries route where I was like, wow, this guy could not have been more overrated, and he's picked it up quite a bit. So, that's definitely somebody to look out for in a team that's underperforming. I mean, we don't have to get into the whole drama of him last year over the summer signing, but I would urge people to check it out. Yeah. The way in which he landed his F1 seat was very controversial funny. And very funny.
Yeah.
Let's anything else on the season recap?
I don't think so. No.
All right, let's head over to Austria. So this is recapping this past weekend's race, the Austrian Grand Prix. This race was very much highlighted by 10,000 penalties.
Yeah. I've got the numbers here. 1,100 violations, track violations, 61 warnings, 11 black and white flags, and 8 penalties. Ocon took home this race with the most penalties in a single race. I think the best part about this is, I mean, if you didn't watch the race, no one could stay on the track. The cars were flying off. Not flying off, but going over track limits to the point where the stewards couldn't even keep up with the number of violations. They were 20 laps behind what was actually happening the majority of the race.
Right. So the race actually ended, and then there was about an hour delay. I don't know if you saw this in real time, but the race actually ended, and there was like an hour or so delay before the final standings were actually reported because they had to go back and review every single lap.
Yeah.
Which is not normal.
No, and I think we should talk about this because track limits, I think it's very important. But I also think that when the drivers finish, they should know within 5 to 10 minutes of where they finished that race.
Oh, yeah.
Unless there's something that's like out of the question, has never been seen before, track limits isn't new. It happens on Austria every year.
Yeah.
There's got to be a way to figure this out where there's not an hour, 2 hours that go by. All of a sudden, the FIA issues 15 additional penalties, which fucks everyone. And then all of a sudden, Carlos Sainz finished, I think, 4th. And then he got moved down to 6th after it's all said and done. Ocon, he finished the race. He's talking to his race engineer. The race engineer goes, hey, good job. Everyone else got track penalties. You didn't get a single one. Come to find out, he actually had more than anyone else when it was all said and done. Kevin Magnussen DNF'd, I think, the first lap. It was Magnussen. And maybe it was Hulkenberg. One of the Haas's DNF'd the first lap. 10 laps later, it popped up and it said, black and white checker flag for Magnussen for track limits. I'm like, this guy isn't even driving in the fucking race
He's
right
literally
now.
out of the race, yeah. And for those listening to, like, exceeding track limits means both of your tires are outside of the white lines on either side of the track. So you can actually exceed on one side of your car. You can't exceed all 4 tires.
Exactly.
And you will notice when you watch races, they are commonly exceeding, if it's a right turn and they're taking it out to the outside, they're commonly exceeding the left tires, which is good. That's their racing line. But we're talking about exceeding all 4 tires. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
It was literally hard to watch because the amount of laps getting deleted and even in qualifying.
Yeah,
it
that's why
started all the way.
Checo didn't even make it through Q3 because all his laps got deleted.
Right. Can we talk about two? So this was one of the races that had a sprint race in addition to the Grand Prix. So on Friday they had the qualifying time trials. On Saturday, they had on Friday, that qualifying is determining where you start on the grid, what your positioning is for the Grand Prix on Sunday. On Saturday, they have a separate qualifying for a sprint race, which is just a shorter version of the full race that took place also on Saturday. What do you think about that format?
So I like the new format they've done where historically it used to be that you would qualify for how you started the sprint race, and then how you finished the sprint race was how you would start the actual race on Sunday. And I'm glad they moved away from it where qualifying is actually qualifying for the Sunday race. Because then before it just felt like the sprint race was basically just a mini race. And if there was anyone, I think back to Brazil, Magnussen qualified second in his Haas, which was unheard of, had the sprint race, and then he ended up being down in 10th or 11th, and then he had to start the race 11th.
Right.
And it's kind of like that ruins the whole mystique and fun and excitement for it. So I like the new format. However, I'm not totally sold on the sprint races, I would say.
I was going to say, I don't know if this is a hot take. I don't like this format. I do not like the sprint races. To me, the sprint races it's F1 saying, well, it's more racing. So it's them saying more is more. I don't necessarily think more is more. I enjoy Saturday qualifying, Sunday race. Both are very high stakes, very exciting. And the sprint race, it just feels like...
It feels forced.
Yes.
It feels like they're trying to make something that doesn't need to be there.
Right. Okay. Here's what they should do. I just fixed it in my brain. Qualifying on Friday, Grand Prix on Sunday. The reserve drivers participate in the sprint.
The sprint race?
Yeah. So now it's almost like you have the team grows a little bit, and you're seeing the up and comers.
Yeah, the new guys
compete.
Get
Same
some
car.
Celebrities in there too.
Same car, same track.
Where I think they should go with the sprint races is I would like them to do reverse grid for the sprint races, where there's still the qualifying for Sunday, then you have qualifying for sprint race, but then it's reverse grid, or maybe it's reverse grid for the race on Sunday, so there isn't a second qualifying for the sprint race.
Yeah, because you can't do a second because it's incentivizing them to finish
Sandbag,
slower.
yeah.
So you do qualifying, sprint races, reverse grid.
Yeah.
Because then you can see how good some of these guys actually are.
Well, I think the whole point of the sprint race is it's to create excitement, to have
Right.
something else that's a no risk race.
Well,
but dude, if you're riding in 10th place in a sprint race, only the top 8 gets points.
Yeah.
It's why would I risk it for a
tomorrow.
point? You know?
And that's where I think they're going wrong with it. It's that more is more mentality. It's it's more racing, so it's better. Well, I don't necessarily think that that's true. The stakes have to make sense.
Yeah.
And there has to be a reason for them to care about this. And I don't think
I don't think there is.
Yeah.
For the mid-level and the low-level teams, there straight up isn't a reason for them to care.
There is if you're competing for the constructors, but in a season like this season where there is no competition for the constructors, then what does it really matter?
Yeah.
It's only the top 8, and all those same cars are driving. And you have teams like AlphaTauri that are celebrating 10th. I'm celebrating every single time they get 10th place. You guys need to understand that. So they're not getting 8th place.
No.
No. That's really the problem with it. Or if they just change the scoring system, I don't know. I really think I just don't like it. I think it's unnecessary. They could fill that gap with something better.
Agreed. I do like how there's less practice sessions on sprint race weekends because I think a lot of the low-level teams, they just treat that sprint race like another practice session, basically. But I do kind of like the idea that with 3 practice sessions, I wouldn't mind if there was less. It creates a little bit more do we really know the car? Do we have the right setup? A little bit more variables for that race on Sunday versus by 3 practices, the teams have it dialed down. Their car is as good as it can be. And I think it'd be a little bit more fun if there was one other variable involved with the race.
Okay, what if we like really Americanize it, and instead of doing a sprint on Saturday, they do drag races on Saturday? So it's literally just who has the best straight line speed, quarter mile. They
Drag
have
race.
Vin Diesel shows up and he calls it.
And then the drag race. And then I was thinking like they actually do the Daytona 500. Like,
Yeah. Just right after.
Right after, yeah.
We fixed F1.
Yeah,
You're
that's
welcome.
all we need.
Yeah.
What'd you think of the race though? Overall, besides like these penalties, like what was your takeaway?
The penalties were super distracting, first
Yeah.
of all. It was very distracting. Overall, it was relatively competitive. There were a handful of groups. There was a really solid shootout. I believe it was for 12th to 15th, which again sounds uninteresting, but it actually was. I don't know. It wasn't a race that like really moved the needle for me, to be totally honest. I enjoyed qualifying this week more than I enjoyed the race.
Damn. So I thought this was one of the more exciting races that we've
interesting.
had this season.
Okay, why?
I just felt like there was great wheel-to-wheel racing. There was always overtakes. There was always passing. And I just feel like Austria always brings really good races from what I've seen. And I feel like this one delivered because there was just a nonstop battle. And the overtakes, some of the battles were really good, I felt like. So I thought this was a really exciting race.
Yeah, when you stack it up against something like a Monaco, which in my opinion is only popular because it's Monaco.
Because of the yachts.
Yeah, it's no longer popular for the actual race because
Right.
there's literally no physical space for passing. Yes, compared to something like that, I would say that yes, it was interesting. The penalty was distracting. The one thing that was funny though was listening to the guys self-reporting the penalties. There were some really good radio clips from
Oh my
this.
God. Some of the best clips of the season, I think, have been from this last race.
Oh yeah, I mean the kind of like highlight one being Toto essentially telling Lewis like, "Dude, shut up and drive." Like, let me pull up his actual
It was
words.
basically Daddy Toto coming in, telling Hamilton to quit narking on Lando. And what did he say? He said something like, "Hamilton, we know the car's bad. Just race the car."
Yeah, it was something along those lines. It was basically like, yeah, we know the car sucks. Like,
Yes.
just finish the race.
Also, I think it's a bit embarrassing for Lewis. You know, like he gets really fired up about these things. He got to the point where he's like, I have no other way to win besides just reporting all of the infringements that other cars are doing, to the point that Toto actually has to step in over the radio to say, "Hey, man, stop." Like, I feel like that's just
So
it's happened before, but I just feel like Daddy Toto steps in and is like, "Bad Lewis."
yeah, so the actual quote was, "Lewis, the car is bad. We know. Please drive it."
Yeah.
Like, it was just so good. Why is Lewis still in F1?
Dude, I don't feel like he's enjoying it
No,
anymore.
right?
You know?
Like I wouldn't either.
I don't think
like he has nothing left to prove. I mean, I guess if he's really trying to solidify himself as the best ever, okay. But honestly, like, I don't even think, and this is an interesting question I'd love to hear your opinion on, can you even determine a best ever in F1? Because the literal equipment that you're using to race with is so different from year to year, and not to mention decade to decade, that unless if you can literally take a Senna and a Schumacher and a Hamilton and a Verstappen and throw them in the same car at the same time, there's really no way. People have this argument with like Michael Jordan and LeBron, and they're like, it's totally different eras. Yeah, well, dude, both of those eras, they were using the same type of basketball, the same type of hoop, and they both wore tennis shoes, bro. So, like, it wasn't that different. This is, like, so different.
It's crazy, man. And I still feel like you could have a best of all time in F1. But you're right. Like, there's always going to be something different to it. But I don't think I'd put Hamilton as the best ever.
No, I mean, he's in the conversation.
He's for sure in the
I think he's in the
conversation.
top 5 without a doubt, and a lot of people probably put him in their top 3. But really though, like if you're Lewis, why
are you? Well, dude, I feel like this is kind of what happened with Vettel. Is he went to Red Bull when Red Bull first came out? They won, I think, 6 championships in a row. He was on top. Vettel then kind of floundered around, went to Ferrari for a little bit, had a couple good seasons there, and then kind of was in these midfield teams and just slowly like withered away.
Right.
And I feel like I wouldn't say he ruined his legacy, because he has a phenomenal legacy with F1, and Vettel and Hamilton are very different kind of people, I would say.
Sure.
But I'd see what bothers me with Hamilton is he never bitched when he was in his Mercedes. He never
Right.
complained when they were winning championship after championship. And now that he's in a car that isn't as competitive, he's talking about we need to change regulations. So you have to
Right.
stop. You have to stop like updating your car after a certain period because it's not fair. And it's like,
Yeah.
where were you saying that when you guys
where
were
was this
winning season after
3
season?
years ago? Exactly. No, I totally agree. I also just think, like, to your point, between a Hamilton and a Vettel, like, they are very different personalities. I mean, Hamilton is as much of a celebrity now as he is a professional athlete.
For sure.
He's very involved in fashion. He's very involved even in like politics. He does a lot of campaigning for different things. Maybe the answer is that the dude just loves racing, and the reason you and I are not F1 drivers is because we don't have that dog in us like Lewis does. Yeah, Lewis just
Hamilton, dog.
Lewis is just a dog, and he wants to drive, and maybe that's just as simple as it is. But I just like the amount of energy and toll and time and risk that you're taking by doing this. I can't understand to some degree why it's worth it for him anymore.
I'm kind of surprised he came back this season.
Do you think he retires as a Mercedes driver? Like, do you think he goes out at some point? I wouldn't say on top because I would say he's no longer on top, but relatively on top, and he kind of
I would
goes
say
off.
I see him retiring before he takes a seat with another team.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. I would like to see that as well. I have fears for him doing the, Brett Favre, now Aaron Rodgers thing where they go from like a dynasty to the Jets.
Vikings.
So maybe I'll see Hamilton and AlphaTauri next year.
Yeah.
Oh.
Crazier things have happened.
I'll take it. That'd be fine. Yuki and Hamilton, I'll take that.
Yeah. I think, too, this was a huge race for Checo Perez, for Sergio. He has, I feel like, really... He was kind of in that hot seat. You were in the hot seat earlier. I was in the hot seat. Checo was in that hot seat for a while where I feel like if he didn't deliver this race, there was going to be question marks about his future as a Red Bull driver for the rest of the season, especially with him. I heard this stat. Nico Hülkenberg has more Q3 appearances than Sergio Perez does this season, which is, you think about those two different cars, completely different. But Checo needed that to solidify his seat. He had one of the best recovery drives I've seen, going from 15th to finishing 3rd. So that was a huge drive for him.
He is in the worst position of anybody in F1 right now. It's a no-win, really, for him, literally. And you know what's interesting is starting the year after the first handful of races, he was actually neck and neck with Verstappen. I remember in third race of the season, I can't remember, but Verstappen was pushing for fastest lap at the end to try to win the extra point so he could pass Checo in the Drivers' Championship because they were neck and neck. Now, I mean, it's not even close.
No.
Like, he has no shot. And I would argue that he never really did. He's
take
essentially
that seat knowing what you're getting
Paul
yourself
Walker
into.
saying, "I had you," and Verstappen's Vin Diesel saying, "You had me. You never had me." I don't know the exact quote, but everyone knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
He was granny shifting, not double clutching like he should. That was the problem. But really though, he is truly in the worst position. It is a lose-lose. It is, you must take second place or you're underperforming and we need to start thinking about replacing you.
Yeah,
because
also,
the car is that good.
If you start winning, we need to think about replacing you too.
Yeah, now it's a problem because you're beating Max.
Right.
Which they'll never admit it, right? Like you've heard interviews with Christian Horner, yeah. He won't pick a favorite child.
But we know who his favorite child is.
But like if there's a fire, we know who he's grabbing, right?
Yeah. Checo's burning alive.
Yeah.
I think too, Lando had a phenomenal drive this race, finishing in P4. He was 5th, and then Sainz had that penalty post-race.
He actually had no penalties at Lando.
Yeah, correct.
Which is shocking because Hamilton was very convinced that he did.
He should have had 10.
Yeah.
I think that was huge for McLaren. They had some new upgrades that they brought to this track this season. He got him. Piastri did not, which is why we saw Piastri in like 15th most of the race. He also had some front wing damage. So great drive by Lando. Next race at Silverstone, they're bringing Lando with additional upgrades, and then Oscar will have the upgrades that Lando had at this race. So that team might be starting to turn it around. They might start to be competing with that Mercedes. Lando was hanging on to Hamilton, past Hamilton, and for a while there, he was sticking close with Sainz too.
Do you think Lando is potentially a championship driver?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If he's into the right car, no doubt about it.
I would love to see it. I
Same.
mean, he's a great personality. He has performed. He's basically consistently taken like 6th place in every single race forever.
Yeah, that's his career.
Which is really hard to do, by the way, and especially, I mean, he outperformed Ricardo last
for
year.
2 years consistently.
Which is hard. Ricardo as a veteran, Lando is relatively new.
Yeah, the newbie.
Yeah, and also, fun fact, Lando, very, very good sim driver as well. Like, he does sim racing professionally, I guess, and Max does too.
Max does as well. Max is also one of the best FIFA players in the world.
Is that true?
Yeah, like top 100 FIFA players.
Wow.
Yeah.
Imagine being that good at stuff.
Yeah, video games and driving.
Well, this is obviously the #1 F1 podcast in the world, so it's fine. We're catching up.
We're that good at things.
Yeah.
One other thing I think is funny too. I've never been a Ferrari fan. I just think how they handle their race strategy is abysmal. Some of the calls they make, they ran a decent strategy this race, but some of the communications that how Ferrari handles it compared to every other team is so different. With Mercedes, it's very much, hey, Lewis, we're doing a 3-stop. You need to box this lap. And Lewis goes, I don't want to. And they go, well, no, here's why you're doing this. He goes, okay. He trusts the team. Most of the time, Mercedes makes the right call.
Right.
With Ferrari, it's like this conversation of like, hey, do you think we should do 3 stops?
Yeah.
And Charles is like, the fuck? I don't know.
Yeah,
like,
you tell me, dude.
Right.
Well, and that's one of the most interesting parts of F1, by the way, is the amount of interaction that the team has to the actual race itself. And this was something that I didn't even notice until it was really until I started watching like Drive to Survive and really watching every race, every driver, that the team are changing things on the driver in real time. I remember a couple years ago, there was the famous, it was last lap. They started calling him Last Lap Lando because he had 2 passes in the last lap to take 3rd place. And they go over the radio and they say, okay, Lando, we're in scenario 7. And he's like, scenario 7? And like, that's like full send, we're going. And that's like, the team is delivering all of the power left to the car. They're literally changing the car in real time on Lando so that it can perform differently.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, something that most American people don't realize because it's not as applicable to a NASCAR.
Right.
And there are some similarities, but this is way
Totally
more
different.
over the top. Yeah. Okay, Silverstone preview. Silverstone is coming up this weekend. It is essentially the premier British Grand Prix. It is literally the British Grand Prix. Shout out Lewis, welcome home, I guess. What are some of the highlights heading into this race? One of the biggest highlights is actually not about the race itself. It's that for the formation lap, which is the first lap of the race where the drivers get into the order that they're going to be starting in from their starting spots. Brad Pitt is actually going to be in a car leading the formation lap. Because they are shooting a scene for an upcoming movie allegedly called Apex, in which he plays an F1 driver.
Cool. I mean, it's
kind of what
I don't know.
Yeah,
it's like
it's a thing that's happening. This weekend. So if you want to sound like you know about stuff, and
mention Brad Pitt,
be like, hey, did you see Brad Pitt in the F1 race this weekend?
I think Tom Cruise was in the pit wall last year at this race too. So for whatever reason, this one gets like these old actors that were like they're still A-listers, you know. I think that movie's gonna be pretty funny with Brad Pitt though.
Are you excited for an F1 movie?
I think it's gonna suck.
Okay, so
I think it's gonna suck.
Sports movies,
they're never good, man.
Well, it's just
Miracle was a good one.
Miracle's great. It's really hit or miss.
Friday Night Lights,
especially when it's like a non-traditional sport for Americans, quote unquote. Have you seen the movie Warrior, the MMA movie with the 2 brothers who fight each other?
No, I've seen the thumbnail for it. So I think
really
I have,
great movie.
But I haven't.
It is so bad. It's really good actually. You should genuinely watch it. It's really good. That was done really well.
Have you seen Never Back Down?
Of course, yeah. So Warrior is a much better Never Back Down.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a similar vibe, but it's much better. But I don't know. Racing's hard to get right, I think, on film.
I think it is too. I think the closest movie would be the one with the Le Mans.
Talladega Nights. I'm just kidding.
That's a great one. I mean, that's an all-time movie, actually.
No, Ford vs. Ferrari was done very
decent.
well. The thing about that, though, is it's capturing like a very historical drama that happened that was bigger than the race itself, right? And so I guess I don't know exactly what Apex is about. So maybe there is a story that I'm sure there is that I'm not aware of. I'm not aware of it being a true story.
That's what I've heard too. I don't think it's about like an actual event.
Right.
There is an F1 movie about I can't remember the guy's name, but it's Jackie.
Chan.
Yeah, no.
Hang on.
Close.
Looking it up right now.
It's about a guy with blonde hair, and then okay, I got it.
Yep.
Nicky Lauda.
Okay.
And he had a rival. I can't remember his name. It might have been just called Drive.
I'm not seeing it. I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, there's obviously like documentaries. There's a great Senate. Oh, Driven.
Rush. Yeah.
There's also one called Driven that has an audience score of 33% on Rotten
we gotta
Tomatoes.
check that out.
So I highly don't recommend that you watch that.
Yeah, I would say like I don't have high hopes for the movie. With Brad Pitt being in it though, there's gonna be a lot of production about it. It's gonna be, I would hope, decent. I just think it's gonna be weird. Brad Pitt's in his 50s, maybe even his 60s.
Yeah.
Like the average age for F1 drivers are 22, 23. So
what's the guy?
what's
The movie about the
story gonna
guy
be?
who tried out for the Eagles when he was like
Oh
in his
yeah,
40s.
yeah. I know the one he like walked on
Yeah,
and he ends up playing.
Jake, you should know this.
The Rookie?
What's the movie? No, it's a baseball,
That's a baseball movie.
What's the movie about the guy who walked on the Eagles when he was like very old for an NFL player?
I have no idea. I have never.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It's essentially like that. Invincible.
Invincible, yeah.
Yeah.
What year was that?
It came out before you were born, Jake. It came out in
06?
2006.
Yeah, yeah, before I was born. Yeah.
No, but anyway, I will say that I did see trailers recently for a new movie coming out called Gran Turismo. Have you seen this? This looks really good, actually. So it's a true story, which helps.
Yeah.
And it's about a competition that Gran Turismo, the company, or like the business game, whatever, did alongside Nissan's Nismo racing team, where they did a competition for sim drivers, and they took the top sim driver and converted him into an actual
I've heard
driver.
about
And this
this.
kid drove in Le Mans.
I heard about this.
It looks good.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
It's a like pretty solid cast as well.
Because
And
that gives hope for the guys like you and me.
yeah, well, there's still a chance.
There still is a chance.
Yeah.
We're not that old, right?
Yeah.
For an F1 maybe.
If
But for Brad Pitt,
can do
he
it.
can do it.
The guy from Malcolm in the Middle, he drives in NASCAR now.
The main, like,
Malcolm. Oh my God,
he was in Agent Cody Banks.
Yes. Why are we so bad at remembering everything? I promise people listening to this, we're going to either cut this
Didn't
or
he-
get
dude,
better.
I-
Frankie Muniz.
Frankie Muniz.
Frankie Muniz is a NASCAR driver.
No, he's not.
Yes.
On like the
Yes.
main like NASCAR.
Yes.
Like that's fucking
He's
awesome.
in NASCAR.
Go Frankie,
Yeah,
dude.
Malcolm in the Middle to NASCAR. Granted, I'm sure making millions as Malcolm and Malcolm in the Middle and whatever else probably helped
Helps,
jumpstart his
yeah.
career. But this podcast is going to jumpstart our career.
For
when we
sure.
have, for F's sake, F1 team,
Yeah. Who's gonna be laughing then?
yeah, probably most of the grid. But regardless,
Dude, so I do love Silverstone. I think this is one of the best races every year. Last year's race was fucking crazy. That was the Joe Guan Yu crash where he went up into the stands. Sainz won. You had like just battles all over the entire race. So I'm looking forward to this one. McLaren has a new livery. I don't know if you saw it. They did a little flashback to their Chrome
I did.
days.
Yeah.
What did you think about it?
Did you see Lando's helmet?
The helmet's awesome.
Dude, it's
The helmet
awesome.
is really cool.
Yeah, no, I think it looks really cool. I like when the teams change things up like that. I think
Same.
it doesn't really impact the race, obviously. Although Lando's helmet might literally blind people. It is like chrome as chrome can be. Very cool. Yeah, I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be a good one. Kind of just predictions going into the outcome. Max Verstappen's going to win.
Easy dub.
Without a doubt. I think that Charles Leclerc is going to take second. I think he's going to finally kind of catch his stride for the year. And Alonso will be back up on the podium at third, which is not like the boldest of predictions, but I do think Charles is going to figure it out, and this will be the one where they kind of dial it in.
What would you say is going to be the biggest surprise for this race coming up? If you had to pay like a number on it or any take there.
Ocon out of the points.
Oh, all right.
I think he's going to be rattled from this past week, and he's going to finish out of the points, probably 12th, 13th.
There might be rain this weekend.
Okay.
Maybe rain on Sunday.
It's going to rain in England?
Yes, surprise, right?
Yeah.
Mind the gap. And so I would say I think Max is going to win. You know, like how does he not? I think Checo's going to finish. I think Checo's going to podium. But I'm going to go Alonso P2. I think they're going to put together a good race. I think McLaren is not going to have as good of a race as they did in Austria. I think conditions in Austria compared to Silverstone are very different. So I don't think they're going to have that stellar performance like they had. But I think the the surprise, I would say. I think we're going to see, dude, I'm going to call it, there's going to be another big crash this race. Something crazy is going to happen. There's going to be some wet.
Don't name any names just in case.
No. There's going to be rain that happens. I'm predicting a good race.
Okay, awesome. Is there going to be any DNFs?
Oh, yeah, easily.
How many? Well, I guess
3.
you're predicting a crash.
We'll go 3.
3 DNFs.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, we'll see, and we will circle back, I guess. How do we end the show? I don't know, Nick.
That's our podcast. We'll catch you guys next week back here.
We're going to clean it up significantly,
grid.
and this is going to get much better as weeks go on.
Yeah. Well, for F's sake, we'll see you guys next time.
We hope you enjoyed the F1ng podcast. Check out our socials for additional content, and we will see you out on the grid.